All right, let's get started. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Good morning or afternoon or maybe even evening to folks in the room. Let's see here, make sure I have connections. My name's Patrick Masson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Apereo Foundation. And the microconferences are a monthly event that Apereo holds where we invite speakers and practitioners from across higher education and open source communities to share their activities and interests and ideas to not only help us understand the current state of open source and education technology, but also perhaps inspire us and help us on our own journey in these different areas. So thank you very much for joining us. Just as a little bit of a pre-conference publicity and promo here, we would, if you're interested in getting information about the microconferences and the speakers and the topics that are coming up, at the bottom of every Apereo page, there's a little link there that allows you to join the Apereo communications. Basically, it's a listserv that allows you to identify different topics you're interested in. So microconference is one of them, but obviously if you're interested in projects or other activities that Apereo is doing, you can join there too. So I encourage you to sign up there to get the latest information, not only about the microconferences, but the videos afterwards and some of the discussions that are happening around the topics as they come up. It's a good resource just to have come in, and if you see something of interest, you can jump on a monthly microconference call. I'd also like to thank our sponsors that make the microconferences possible. JMA Consulting, they specialize in CiviCRM support and development, and it's the tool that we use at Apereo to send out the information and manage the events and register for the events and so on. Also, I'd like to thank Blindside Networks and Big Blue Button for the platform that we use. And finally, the Apereo community that both volunteers to speak and helps promote the work that we do around this, and also participates by joining us in events like this one today. So speaking of today, we're going to be talking about open source program offices at research institutions and the hard work and dedicated work that it takes to build these and work with campuses to instill them as part of the research and academic endeavors and activities on campuses. And we have two excellent representatives of this effort who have, over the last, 2-3 years, have been, well, longer within their careers of education and open source, but specifically to building open source software, have been working to raise awareness of the value of OSPOs and also develop, actually put in practice the principles that they've been advocating for over the last few years. So first, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Lieggi, Executive Director of the Center for Research in Open Source Software, or CROSS, at UC Santa Cruz. Since 2016, she's been a champion for academic open source, launching programs like the Open Source Research Experience and helping build a UC-wide, not just UC Santa Cruz anymore, a UC-wide open source program office with the support of Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. Joining her is Dr. Angela Newell, Executive Director of Innovation and Director of Open Source Program Office, the OSPO at the University of Texas at Austin. Angela leads efforts to connect students with real-world technology careers through the university's Innovation Lab, and has played a key role in advancing open source research and education. She also teaches at UT Austin, McCombs School of Business, and Public Affairs. So please join me in welcoming both Stephanie and Angela. And with that, I will hand it over. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks, Patrick. In a second, I will share my slides. I think it's over here. Cool. All right. Thanks again for inviting us, Apereo. And Patrick also, I don't think noted that we both, Angela and I are both also part of the Apereo board, and we've really enjoyed. I have, and I believe Angela would say the same. I've enjoyed our time working with the Apereo Foundation and this great community. And thanks for inviting us to talk about this. I know that Angela and I are both very excited about this topic. Obviously, it's a really big part of our lives right now. So let's just get started. See if I can get my slides to go. Oops, sorry. So yeah, we already got the introductions for us. So, but this is our contact details as well. I think, yeah, feel free if anything comes up during this talk that you think of questions later. All these, feel free to reach out to us. There's various ways of getting in touch with us. So, let's see. All right. So this is a quick overview of what we'll talk about today. I'll talk a little bit about, or I have a slide about academic OSPOs, and I'm happy to stay on that for a little bit for those of you who aren't so quite aware of what an academic open source program office does. But I think Patrick gave a pretty good kind of quick synopsis of that. And I think a number of you looking at who's on the chat or who's on the call are actually well aware of it, recognizing many names. I do want to give a shout out, of course, to Alfred P. Sloan Foundation and the amazing work that they do. Everything that we're going to talk about is almost 100% supported by them and made possible by them. And many of us on this call are very grateful for the efforts, the help they've been giving us for what we're doing. So we're going to also talk about, each of us, about our case study. So like talk about how UCSC and UC started their open source program office network. And then Angela will talk about her activities in Texas. And then we'll move on to just kind of some shared comments about challenges and opportunities, and also the important thing of how do we make this last in the long term. So many of you will recognize the slide, since I know many of you are part of the Curious Network that are on this call. And thanks to the Curious Network for being also a really great support system for those of us working on academic OSPOs. But this is kind of what, the idea of what do academic OSPOs do, and how do they differ maybe a little bit from the ones you see in other types of organizations, industry and public organizations. But kind of one of the great things about, and we'll talk about this in a little bit later when we get into the discussions about the networks, is one of the nice things about doing OSPOs as a system-wide network is that instead of me having to do all of these things, or Angela and I having to do all of these things in one campus, we actually are able to leverage the activities of our different nodes to be able to do maybe not all of these things, but a lot more than if we can do as a single campus. So I think I was gonna say, if people have specific questions about academic OSPOs, I was gonna leave it open, but I do think that maybe we covered a little bit more earlier that I get at least to give you an idea, and I'm really happy to answer questions about that later on too. So, but feel free to raise your hand or put questions in the chat. But right now I'll talk more about the case studies of UC. So just to give you an idea of the scale of what we were talking about, the University of California system is 10 campuses. They're all R1, so they're all very similar in that way. I mean, we all have our peculiarities, and I always joke that we are like, there's constant sibling rivalries, but at least when we're doing, and you'll see this, I think, as a comparison to what Angela is doing within the University of Texas, is it's like a lot of apples to apples, at least. I mean, we all have, the star child versus the child who, like, the goofy child, like the oldest versus the youngest, like as you have in any family dynamic. Us in Santa Cruz, I think, being the baby of the group. Well, Merced is actually our younger child, but that dynamic being like a little bit of rivalry between the campuses. But all in all, at least we have very similar setups. We're all research campuses. So in some ways we have very similar goals. And aside from the campuses, of course, we have medical centers, and we have a huge, like a very important relationship with national labs here in California. And there is an estimated that we have 5 inventions per day happening at the University of California. And as well as that, we have a lot of open source. I mean, a lot of stuff coming out of Berkeley. People would recognize, you know, RISC-V, Spark, you know, arguably Jupyter, because I know I can't say it's from UC, but a lot of UC people were involved with that. For UC Santa Cruz, Ceph, the Human Genome Project, and any number of other smaller projects from other campuses that are from our system. So definitely things that you have heard of, had origins, or at least, you know, a strong connection to the University of California. Make sure I did that right. Sorry. So our origin story has a lot to do with the fact that even though we had all of those open source activities going on and great innovation happening, there has not until now been a coordinated effort to work with the different campuses together and leverage each other's strength in order to boost open source and open practices throughout the system. Each individual campuses had little things that they were doing, but really no one concerted effort within the entire system. So the actual start, I guess, you know, depending on how you define where this all started, but I will say it started with us at UC Santa Cruz with Cruz, which started in 2015. I joined in 2016. And Cruz, we were very lucky. We had an endowment from the founder of Ceph, Sage Wild, who many of you may know was a UCSC graduate student, got his PhD at UCSC, and then moved on to sell, you know, to basically create a startup, sell that startup to Red Hat, make numbers of millions of dollars, and then donate that back to his alma mater because he wanted to allow other students to have the experience he had working in open source. So we started out really being a gap between student research and open source projects. So giving them that pathway to creating an adoptable, sustainable open source project. And we focused a lot at that point and continue to on research translation and the sustainability of that and thus impact of that research. But we were also finding, like around 2019, 2020, that we started doing other stuff. And a lot of it was, you know, things like workforce development or student education programs, or you name it. There was things that we were doing that didn't quite fit under a research project, or sorry, a research center like Cruz is under the School of Engineering at UCSC. So, and that overlapped in the period 2020, where there was a lot more discussion about this idea of having academic OSPOs, and that we kind of came into it. So we kind of had the makings of an OSPO already, and we just didn't know what to call it that. So 2020 and 2021, we're having these discussions with a lot of other folks from a lot of different campuses, Johns Hopkins, RIT, and many more, and CMU as well. And we were the first round of kind of the invited Sloan participants in to create an academic OSPO. We were kind of the pilot of the pilots. And that happened in 2022. Part of that grant from UCSC was specifically aimed at expanding or seeing how we could expand this to the UC system. So that was always written into our grants and part of our goals of this effort from the beginning. So in 2023, we started having discussions with a broader swath of people. So we have different campuses that were interested, that actually reached out to us. We had done some outreach, but we noticed when there was an open call for Sloan to create, to support the creation of open source program offices on different campuses. All of a sudden, all of the UCs that we've been trying to get a hold of or deal with or interact with more, we're like, oh, hey, you have one, let's talk. So that discussion actually led to us having a separate call or separate kind of invited new pilot for a network of OSPOs that was funded by Sloan again, of course, in 2024. And so we've been working on that one since then, so like a little over a year. And excuse me, this was the first, of course, OSPO network from a large statewide university system. And that's our little logo. I have been told that I need to mention the fact that the UCSC mascot is a banana slug and how adorable that is, because Angela thinks that's amazing. So, and I will probably bring up a slug at another point in this talk. But that's our OSPO logo for the UCSC open source network, which if you look at it, it says OSPO there, but I'm always look at it and I think, oh, it's a little dancing lady. And that's what we call it, the dancing lady logo. So these are our 6 campuses that are part of it. We want, of course, all of the campuses listed there, plus all the labs, plus you name it. We want everybody. We want a complete domination of the UC system, or at least complete acceptance by the UC system. So the other 6 campuses listed here, Berkeley, Davis, UCLA, Santa Barbara, and San Diego, are all part of our larger network. And we have within that network, and we try and keep it very even though UCSC is the first. We tried from the very beginning, tried to be the first among equals kind of idea. I mean, obviously Berkeley has, of all of these campuses, probably has the most open source, so having them on board was super helpful. But UCLA is one of our largest campuses. UC Santa Barbara, and UC Davis they all have their own important expertise that we were all able to leverage. So this has been a great partnership so far. And this is how we kind of work. We're trying to balance this central coordination, which is our OSPO leadership group, or OLG, with the campus autonomy. So that's, again, recognizing that campuses in our system are very autonomous. They very much have their own ideas about how doing things, but we still have to work within the same system. So there are models out there for groups that hit large number of campuses through the system. Our libraries are great because they were a great model, and because half of our campuses are based in the libraries or have a basis in the libraries. So and the reason why I think a lot of this works is because working with librarians is great. And I'm not just saying that because I know librarians are on the call, but they have been a great group to work with because they're very organized. They understand this type of structure, and they're able to kind of socialize it within the groups that they work with. And so that's been a really huge, I think, benefit to the way the network has worked, because we're very much a based on consensus group. All of the leadership group is anybody who touches it, who wants to be part of the leadership group at this point, is allowed to be on the leadership group. We tried to have this discussion, is it PIs versus co-PIs or whatever, and we just realized we need everybody's help. So we were very inclusive in our leadership group discussions. So that's kind of the lead. That's kind of, let's say, the spoke of this wheel that we are on. And then from there, also we have working groups that actually get the job done, get the work done, get the activities organized. And I'll talk a second about that in a bit, about those specific ones. So those are discovery, sustainability, and education. And these were written through, and these were came through the grant process of writing, how do we want to organize our activities? And those were the kind of 3 important pillars that we pointed out within the larger system, within the way the network was going to organize itself. We also have task forces, which is our kind of subgroup of smaller activities that are shorter amount of time. The working group's kind of meant to stay throughout the life of the grant, and maybe longer, where task forces are meant to be we have to do this one thing and we're going to come together. And then the great thing about, I think, reason why we are successful, and I see a huge likelihood of long-term success, is the fact that we've created network staff positions, or at least one in particular, our community manager position, and some other ones that are serving the entire network. So that, I think, it's helped because it makes sure that the network itself is still moving together and people are working together. So I think that has helped a lot in our system. And I have to shout out to our community manager, Laura Langdon, who's been amazing. So these are, I'll go briefly over that, just if people want to ask some more questions about what we're doing in these, we can, if we have time at the end, talk about this. I want to give enough time for Angela to also talk about her work. So discovery is us trying to figure out, I mean, all of the OSPOs, academic OSPOs that have started over the last few years had the same issue of, well, we know open source is happening on our campus, we just don't know where it is. So please help me find it. So we've created an amazing tool as part of our discovery efforts called the UC Open Source Research Browser. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And that, as well as doing a great survey to our wider community to understand people's perceptions of open source and what they need. And that's a huge part of what the discovery group is working on. We have an education group that looks at a number of different things, including a gap analysis of what needs to happen within the system, as well as what's already there. And there's a lot of focus on the carpentries. So if you're aware of the carpentries, one of the leads of that group is actually heavily involved in carpentries as well. And we're also aiming towards having multi-campus training in different open source areas. The sustainability is also looking at important, and that's another issue that comes up a lot, where as well, we're going to create these projects on campus, but and then what? And then what is kind of what the sustainability group is working on. So not just for academic open source, but also for open source projects in general. We have a few things I want to highlight that we've been doing that have really been great over the last year and a half. Our kind of jump out to the world, and at the 1 year anniversary was our open source summit, the UC Open Source Summit. It's the first time there's been a system-wide focus on open source and open source activities. It was 125 participants, and we got somebody from every campus and a bunch of different other parts of the system, including California Digital Library, from the labs. And it was a great 2-day event that we hosted at UCSC, but was open to, of course, all campuses. And that was a great opportunity to kind of hear what people wanted. And so again, it really helped help us, especially as we started moving into thinking, okay, what are the next phase look like? What are our customers? What are the people that we're supposed to be serving want from us? So that was a great event. The UC Orb that I mentioned also, I had to double check those numbers. I meant to actually double check. I think there may be more, but there is a large number of repositories found. And at the moment, that's just scraping GitHub, but plans are to kind of expand that. But what it's helped us do is identify projects that maybe we didn't know exist that could use support, that could use help, but also could use a little support from us to highlight to potential sponsors. And that's also a major part of that effort. Again, the community survey was really, really helpful in getting us to understand our goals, and having a database, have a databases for everything that we're doing and why we're doing it. Also, our folks from the sustainability group created a pilot that is now almost up and running, the OSPRI program, which is focusing on OSS sustainability monitoring. Sorry, I can't talk. And of course, we've had a ton of different training hackathons and community meetups over the last year and a half. A real big focus of what we're trying to do is understand, again, what our audience wants. And the survey itself provided us some useful insights. Not surprisingly, a lot of people develop open source to improve tools in their field. So you have to be focusing on people a little bit different than maybe your standard open source communities, who aren't maybe planning on being maintainers long term. They really just want to create this thing and then give it to somebody else to use. It's a little bit different pathway needed for those type of activities. But they're still concerned about the maintenance and sustainability. So these are the things that they're looking for help with, and definitely, of course, looking for funding and support and resources on the long term. Again, and our UC-wide discussions kind of reiterated some of that, but they also looked at how to integrate open source more in our education, in our support for students, as well as a need to support staff contributions. And this was an issue that came that we didn't even think about when we started the process, is that we have staff throughout the UC system who want to contribute to open source and want to support projects that are useful for the UC system. But aren't really sure of how to do it, what the best way to do it, whether they're allowed to do it under their contracts. And so, so these have been issues that have come up. And we also have a lot of focus on strengthening discussions about strengthening alignment with research development, industry engagement. So moving forward, some of the strategic efforts that we are doing, we have good conversations with our UCOP is UC Office of the President, the legal team who helping us discuss the ideas of streamlining open source licensing and the contributor process, having had these discussions with people who want to contribute to open source. And we have a pretty decent setup within UC. I mean, there's the guidelines there are relatively clear cut, but having it more streamlined to understand how the OSPOs can be part of that and help people understand that what it means to have an open source license. We have a very interesting and amazing, and I almost don't want to bring it up because I don't want to jinx anything, relationship starting with UCOP procurement. And I never in my life when we started this process thought procurement was where we're going to be going when we're talking about who we're connecting with UCOP, but it has been great. They're very excited to help us and figure out how they can integrate this OSPO effort into what they're doing and making open source part of the vendor partnerships and strategic relationships, and also some of the risk management issues. We also have great conversations with our tech transfer offices and innovation hubs, and trying to understand better pathways for open source translation of open source technologies coming out of the UCs. And then as customers and contributors, we are just getting started on how to help our systems ITS program with being a good user and a good contributor to open source. Externally, I'll talk about that a little bit. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later, but the one thing I really would like to highlight is that we are starting, we're having a UN hackathon that if anybody's in the California region, there will be more about that soon. It's UN's, Reboot the Earth. So anybody who went to Open Source Week in the UN, at the UN over the summer will recognize that. We're actually hosting one of those in Santa Cruz and in San Diego a little bit later. And we're coming up in about a month, and San Diego's in January. So next steps, and then I'll wrap up and let Angela talk finally. So we are evolving at the moment. Again, we're kind of moving on to phase 2. We're looking at ourselves as a service model to support the local nodes, and that of course includes reinvestment into our having some network staff that help support all of those nodes. We also want to see increasing open source adoption across the UC research enterprise and support that. So we're going to continue maintaining those tools that we've already created, highlighting open source efforts. We want to see ourselves as kind of a way of mitigating risk for use and contribution to open source throughout the system. And still working with UCOP, legal, and the TTOs in our different offices about licensing guidance. Again, it is not that OSPOs would give licensing guidance, but creating a system that actually makes it an easy process and almost automated for people to understand what they should be doing and what their next steps are, and when to talk to an OSPO about something. And of course, always about funding and figuring out how do we keep paying for this is a discussion of diversifying our institutional support. We're definitely having institutional support, i.e. UC paying for parts of these things that we're doing that are seen as a service, but also understanding that having grant opportunities also gives us some freedom to do different things that we want to do, and again integrating into that and with procurement and other parts of UCOP, I think are really important for that. But I'll leave that there, and we can talk maybe a little bit more about that later. So turn it over to Angela.
Thanks, Stephanie. And unfortunately, Stephanie has to run the slides, so we'll have to kind of be talking about that a little bit. I'm super happy to be here. Thank you to Apereo for having us. Stephanie and I are very grateful for the organization, for Curious, and for all our fellow OSPO team members that we see in the attendees list. So the University of Texas at Austin, we started our OSPO about 2 years ago. We were convened by the provost office They saw a real need on campus for open source software support because, as most people who work with researchers kind of understand, researchers kind of tumble into software development. They aren't not necessarily native software developers. And our campus saw a real opportunity through the OSPO network and the foundational OSPOs that Stephanie mentioned to engage our campus in a new way with open source. So we are a partnership between the Texas Advanced Computing Center, the UT Libraries, the Chief Information Office, and the School of Information. It's a broad partnership meant to touch, you know, a good chunk of campus straight out of the gate. We view ourselves and are viewed on campus as a research support unit. So we offer training, consultation, events. We have a resource center. We offer research grant support in the form of like facility statements, letters, and then working one-on-one with researchers to talk about open source in their grant applications, and then how to make those grants come to life on campus once they get them. And we just started a research matching program where we're matching research projects with open source software development talent. So that's a little bit of an overview of what we do at UT Austin. And we are very grateful, as Stephanie mentioned, to the Sloan Foundation, as they have funded all of our work thus far. So thanks, Sloan. And then Stephanie, if you want to go to the next slide. We offer our services along what we refer to as a participation pathway. And what we're really meant to do here, what this slide really is trying to get at, is we try to meet people where they are and then get them to the next level or wherever they want to go. You know, this pathway is not linear, but we want to help develop people and develop skills in open source software. That's probably all I'll say right now on this slide, just because it's pretty to look at. So I brought it with me. But the goal here is to really get people where they need to go. Now, I wanted to add, we also, like California, do a user survey. We do a user survey annually to understand what our users want to see. So we'll ask them about trainings or resources, or they've recently asked us for a speakers bureau where they can actually engage with other researchers who are currently working on research. So we do try to keep engaged with our user group via survey and interviews with them to talk about what they want to see the OSPO produce. Okay, so Stephanie, I can move on to the next slide. So today we've seen more than 2,000 researchers hit our training. And I listed a few of the trainings and what they look like there, but we try to do everything from immersive languages and getting up and going with like Git and GitHub and those kinds of services to very specialized containerization training, we're doing some events around what does an open source career look like. We try to hit multiple levels of training. And then we also hold complimentary events. Like I said, we just launched our speakers bureau. We had a great talk last week by Jen Shop, our PI, who talked about a case study, NetSage, that she has developed from a baby product all the way now. It's got international implications. We do work with students, so we have an annual hackathon. It's in a couple weeks. We're very excited about that. We partner with our geosciences school and hack research and open source software, and we're even doing open source AI in that hackathon this year. We also have a research compute summit where we just get a whole bunch of researchers together and talk about research computing and how we use it, what we want to do with it. We're doing a quant night this year, so it's around Halloween, so we're all going to get together and talk about software and quant and careers and using open source software in research. It's going to be super fun. We're excited about it. As I mentioned, we do research support and that student matching program. So we have, we think, successfully established ourselves on campus, and our next step, if you want to hit the next slide, is to think about how we can take this out to the University of Texas system. So right now we are currently in a planning grant, thinking about how we broaden this resource set, engage a new partner set, and think about how we can serve our UT system, and we are absolutely inspired by the UC system. I think our system is a little bit more apples to oranges. We have 14 academic and health institutions across our state. We see about 260,000 students, and we work through about $4 billion of research every year. The University of Texas at Austin represents about a quarter of that. We are a big R1 research institute with all kinds of research facilities. We are the flagship in our system. The system, it holds everything from like UT Permian Basin, which is a teaching college very interested in research, that is eminently curious about everything. They are an amazing school. To things like huge medical centers, not only Dell, but UTMD and Anderson, UTMD Anderson, and everything in between. And we have specializations in anything you can think of. We're also incredibly geographically diverse. We have a huge just geography that we span. Our population across institutions, we are all Hispanic serving, but a huge part of our population is first-generation students, first-generation researchers. So we actually think this is a benefit for us because we can capture people as they're coming in the door, really help them understand open source software and how that can help support a research career. So we take this as a huge opportunity, but our system is very, very different. The institutions in our system are very, very different. Stephanie, if you could hit the next slide. Oh, and these are the core partners: UT Austin, UT Dallas, UT El Paso, and UT San Antonio. They will be the 4 core partners in the system grant. However, the system, our aim is to support the entire UT system. And you can go ahead and hit the next slide, please, Stephanie. As our goal for the system grant is to kind of use these 4 institutions to create a hub wherein we produce resources for that larger institutional system. And Stephanie, you can go ahead and hit that slide, and I think it's my last one. So what this looks like right now, we are currently doing a needs and desires assessment. So we gave a massive survey to lots of people, and we've gotten hundreds of responses back on what people would like to see in an open source program office that has system-wide implications. A lot of it's training, a lot of it's resources, a lot of it's connection with other people doing research software. Those were a lot of the responses related to kind of those 3 areas. We're thinking about how we're going to grapple with production of resources. So right now, we have a couple of the institutions have said for the first year, UT Austin, we're going to look to you to support the content development while we get our content development and services up and running, and then we'll contribute back to a larger system of resources that we can share across the other campuses. But there are like centers of specialization that like in our institutions where they're all ready to produce and they're already connected to enough researchers at other campuses that we're just going to take some of those things and shine a huge light on them and leverage what's already existing to really, enhance the connections, establish even stronger connections, and start that network out the gate. We don't know how we'll be governed yet. We know we'll have a user group. We like California's network approach. It's interesting to us. We're really thinking about that. And we're really thinking about how we're going to build out this OSPO as part of the core research infrastructure of the UT system. So that's our goal, is to become part of core to that research infrastructure and build out the open source ecosystem within that research infrastructure. So we you know, we have already encountered some challenges and we're already thinking about sustainability. So I think for the next part of this discussion, I think I'll hand it back to Stephanie, and we've kind of talked about these things and put some slides together. But Stephanie, I'll hand it over to you to lead that discussion.
Yeah, for the next two slides, I think we kind of like I'll probably talk about how I feel on this, and then give Angela a chance, and then she'll do the same for the next slide. Just because we both have like things that we definitely like see as things were shared, and then things I feel like were different because of the different ways are. Like I said, I think the one big thing that came out of our discussions when we were comparing this is, you know, I'm working mainly with research, like R1s. But if we were to, for instance, expand this to our California state system, which is way bigger and has a huge variation of the types of campuses on it, we'd be seeing some things that I think UT's going to have to start dealing with when they're bringing in that wide variety of types of campuses that they're working with. And I think that kind of talks to that first question of there's a lot of different research. One of the challenges is trying to understand the different cultures on the different campuses, the different maturity, especially research maturity. I think one of the challenges that we've had with certain campuses and less than with others is this second point about tech transfer and how that relates to the open source program office. I feel like UCSC, because of, well, one thing I didn't mention is, you know, UCSC is where the human genome was released in the open. And we got a lot of good, that was a very good thing for UCSC, the fact that we were the first to do that. And so the idea of open source was seen as a positive. Berkeley obviously has a very open source focused. There's a lot of open source coming out of those campuses. So there's more of an acceptance of it and understanding of the pipeline involved. Whereas other campuses were a little bit more skeptical. So that we definitely see that variation of different moving towards patents versus moving towards open source. And how we work with our TTOs. I have a great relationship with my TTO. I can't say that for all of the TTOs in that tech transfer offices in our system, but we have a great relationship with UCOP Legal, which is kind of where the TTOs get a little bit of their support. And then again, understanding the different priorities. And I think that last point on that third bullet point, the subpoint there of starting an OSPO a flagship versus a non-flagship institution. UCSC and the banana slugs are not a flagship part of UC. I am saying that. I don't think anybody's surprised by that discussion. I'm sure my chancellor, my dean would not like me to bring that up in public, but it isn't. I mean, we have a very strong engineering program, but we're kind of the second child, the stepchild or the middle child or whatever you want to put it in that analogy with families. And we're not going to argue that Berkeley and LA are kind of our big brother, sister, big sibling. Whether that would have been whether this whole process would have been different. And we've had these discussions with our folks at Berkeley who are great. They're like, yeah, it would have been a totally different feel if the push came from Berkeley, because there would have been a way, there may have been not gone as smoothly because it would have been seen like more, the big person wrestling in. Versus UCSC is a little more chill. People are like, oh, the hippies down down hanging out on the beach, and they're doing cool, fun things. And let's see what they're doing. Oh, this is working out really well. So I think there was a whole different dynamic there. But there's definitely that. I feel like the biggest challenge for us I think as highlighted in these 3 points of dealing particularly with the different campus dynamics and kind of almost a lack of understanding of the open source pathways for some campuses. But Angela, did you want to? Not to.
So I will say we've been very cognizant of we're the big fish in the room. UT Austin, when it shows up, and it's always big. And I think we've been able to have real connection because of TAC, quite frankly. I mean, the Texas Advanced Computing Center is a natural convener for researchers working in compute, and TAC has a reputation for accepting anyone and everyone as they come, and so they've been very instrumental in helping us connect with researchers at other campus. And because we're connecting with researchers as well as, sort of leadership levels, immediately you have an in an area that you might not otherwise, and you're seen more as a colleague than a competition, I guess. So it's been really useful to have an established partner that has connections on all those campuses and shows up well at those campuses. So I think for us, that's allayed some of that, big person in the room kind of thing.
And then we'll move on. Yeah, this is our last slide, if I can go there. And yeah, so I think we're both actually really, obviously, sustainability and long-term development of these OSPOs are the key goal. We want to, this to be something that lasts beyond the grant funding and Sloan's ability to support. So trying to create reproducible models that what I think I like about the fact that UC and UT are both doing this is that, again, we are different. We're from geographically different. We have different. We have different. We look different if you look at all of our campuses versus all the campuses that Angela's going to work with, and so we're creating two models that could be more easily used. One for different systems that recognize more familiarity with what with a UC versus UT. And so that's what I think I'm very excited about, the fact that both of our systems are moving down this pathway. And I think working in what also is really important and I think we talked about this, but maybe touch on a little bit more, for the reason why an OSPO is important as a system is this idea of maximizing knowledge by working collaboratively, that it's not each campus having to reinvent the wheel, but working together, and that moves us along a lot quicker, and then and allows for more people to understand what's going on in a quick way. And so my biggest thing that drives me insane is the idea that somebody's creating, and we talked about this with the user saying, oh, I'm creating this tool for my specific need, for my specific area, without maybe having an opportunity to find out if there's something else that already got created that they can build off of, as opposed to start from scratch. And that is one thing that I know really helps working in a network, because there's way more overview of what is going on. And then, we're talking with tech transfer, creating sustainability options through industry outreach is important. Also, I can talk a little bit more about that, because there was a question about the procurement side as well. And so I think those are things that we're seeing as like long-term, getting institutionalized support, getting support from industry, and understanding how to work in kind of the funding environment at this point. Angela.
Yeah, and I'll add on the tech transfer note, I think an interesting component of our work has been to look at how the differences in different campuses and how they view tech transfer. So some campuses that might not have as large an emphasis on research do have that bigger emphasis on tech transfer as part of sort of like university productivity measurements. So like how you incorporate the tech transfer office into your OSPO becomes really important, depending on sort of like what the university priority is for commercialization, research productivity, all of those variables that universities care about when they talk about, what is the actual knowledge product of our university. So we actually have two campuses in the core network right now that are very excited about having their tech transfer offices involved, and then two offices that are much more on the research support side. So it's a good balance, it's a good mix, but the incorporation of that tech transfer office is so incredibly important. I think not only to sustainability, but to actual operations and getting people interested and engaged. And then one of the things that might go along with that is, and something we're grappling with, that our user group said that they're interested in, is really helping people think through the life cycle of what an open source software project is. So when researchers start out, like sometimes, as we said, like they just fumble into, they need some computational software. our users have asked us to sort of think through, like, if you were starting with a researcher from scratch, how could you help them think through the life cycle a little bit better and understand like the various paths that are available to them as they're creating that software. So this is something that we're really thinking about as part of sustainability, but just also maintenance and operations.
Very cool. I will stop there. I know we only have a few more minutes, so I wanted to leave it for
I just wanted to
questions.
Yeah, first, thank you both very much. And yes, we do have some questions. Stephanie mentioned Justin's question about procurement and how you're working specifically with procurement. He has sounds like some horror stories trying to work with.
Yeah, I didn't get through all of it because I was gonna say, I can only imagine how that's gotta look in the Cal State, because I was saying Cal State is significantly larger. So so I don't know what their procurement system is like. I think they're 3 times as large as the UC system. I need to read that whole question. So
I think the question is just what kind of specific things are you doing with procurement?
Okay, so the great part about our effort with procurement, it was procurement's idea. So it was like, again, I had not thought about procurement as an option. They came to us after a discussion, and the reason why I think it's working is because they're splitting out within UC procurement the strategic relationships part. So they're talking to vendors. Those strategic conversations are separated from the nuts and bolts part, where they talk about like the contracts and stuff. And so things can be created in this strategic relationships part that then get worked out later. But the process of getting that connection is done first, looking at it from a strategic importance to the university system. And I think that's what's going to help us along because we're not going to be part of the nightmare of trying to get through the bureaucracy. Our folks from procurement will help lead that along. I know that one of the things that they're looking to us to do is to really integrate open practices within their vendor relationships and their overall strategic relationships with industry. There has been some discussion, and we're not sure we don't know how this is going to look yet, of also being a source for risk management for working with open source. So if a researcher or if a campus wants to work a specific open source project, and there's feelings of anxiety about that anywhere, that the OSPO can be somehow help with that effort. Be it working with the open source project to get them to do the things that they need to do. Whoever is kind of the maintainer or working in that environment. Obviously, it depends on the project and the size and the governance of that project, how we help them. But the idea is that we might have a more flexible way of working with open source projects that allows them to kind of interact either with the network, or if it's a specific campus, then with a specific campus OSPO. I hope that answers that question.
Angela, is UT working with procurement at all? If so, how's that going?
We are not working with procurement. I
just wanted to give you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, thanks. No, we're not working with procurement.
And then the next question, the next question for both of you, are you working with the IT shops in any way? I know you mentioned the Texas Advanced Computing Center, but the campus IT shops, I guess, in general.
Yes. So, I mean, I'm located in the Chief Information Office, and then TAC is one of our, TAC's our big, we're working with TAC, we're working with the Chief Information Office, and then every semester I do outreach to all of the IT shops and then all of the research deans as well at the same time. So we try to stay connected to both those communities.
I think we're actually, I feel like UT is a little ahead of us on. We've been dealing mainly with the research and education side, and the IT side has been more one-on-one at the individual campuses, so not at the UCOP level. But again, I think I mentioned in the chat that we're starting conversations with them, and like we have like members of that staff members from different campuses who might be members of a task force or something with us. So we're trying to integrate.
Right.
We're kind of doing that at the campus level more than at the system level.
And then Sharon and David both sort of are asking about engagement with humanities. So are you, how might you be working with humanities? I'm trying to find the question here, who don't think of themselves as directly producing software. I'm from a company that supports and sustains a couple open source projects. And then David is highlights George Washington's OSPO is passionate about this as well. They have art, music, English, and other humanities faculty. So is that, are those communities also part of the OSPO, and how so? Or why not?
I think that I can't say that I feel like we're strongly in those departments yet. Our outreach to them is mixed from the different campuses. I know that a lot of our education efforts though are aimed at really focusing on people who are exactly that type of person. I think that Sharon said, which is I don't think of myself as a programmer. But you are working in software and working in open source. So I think that like the carpentries in particular, I think are a great way for us to reach out. I feel like from the UCSC perspective, I have a few folks that I work with or I know of that are outside of the STEM area. And I think that that's just been a challenge. I feel like getting more involved with that, but yeah, it's definitely a focus for the next phase for us.
And I know it's top of the hour, but we have one last question, or maybe Angela just answered it in the chat. But a question about how has your OSPO successfully bridged the gap between industry partners and university students? What concrete steps or frameworks did you put in place to make collaboration sustainable and mutually valuable? That could be a whole session, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say. So in the next hour, I will talk about that. No, that's actually, hey, maybe we make that another talk. Well, I do think that it's important. We are in discussions with various industry partners to create platforms for industry to be able to support research and academia. We have things like open source gift agreements, which means that basically the UC is not allowed to say that they will open source something, but they could say that they're planning on open sourcing it, and that kind of works. And it depends on which campus you're on, whether that works. So I think there's also our mentorship programs have a lot of industry engagement. The work that we're hoping to do with the procurement offices are working with industry a lot. Our previous with Cross his previous life, before kind of the OSPO stuff started, we actually had industry members. That was part of how that program worked, and that was way more like established. Industry gives us money as members, and then we give money to graduate students and postdocs, and they do their open source projects. And so we're trying to get back to that, but in a more flexible way, where we're able to like work with researchers from different PIs from different labs to help support that. So yeah, so we don't have, I can't really point to anything right now. It's kind of something that's still in the works of trying to create a platform where, and I think Angela mentioned that for some of the stuff she did, that it's like matching research with industry sponsorships.
Angela, anything to add?
Yeah, we just developed, we worked with our office of, this is such a Gen Z term, but career and life design. But they run a student program in data science and software development. It's master's degrees who've gone out, they've worked in the world, they've come back. It's 3,000 students strong. And what they do is we help match those students with open source software research projects. So we've actually just developed a formal program. We have, intake forms and skills assessments and industry connections where we do this. We're doing a Hack Your Career Day where we're bringing in people from the outside in industry to talk about their careers in open source, but we're also then doing a series of challenges where we work with the students to work through sort of the technical interviews that they would encounter. We're using open source software to do this, but to get them ready for their skills assessments as they go out into industry. And then we also have a resume review session. So we just launched this. It's brand new this semester, but the interest has been amazing. So happy to talk to anybody about this, share our resources. We're still in production, but as soon as they're available, happy to make them available to whoever would like them.
Great. I think that's it. If I can,
David asked a question about the role of OSPOs in helping secure and helping harden open source projects and secure them, and then kind of get them in a space where they would be competitive with proprietary alternatives. And I would say, David, that's probably something we would hand off to our tech transfer office. And we would work with our tech transfer office to think through what that would look like. We have an industry matching program where it is not seen as competition, but it's cooperation. And so this has worked with some of our projects where they build like dual lines of software. It's a story I can't really tell. We're still understanding, how to work together. But I would say as an OSPO, we probably wouldn't take the stance where we would harden and help people be competitive, but we would work with our tech transfer office to do something like that if a researcher requested.
Yeah, I think we would actually work with our innovation hub folks for that, but tech transfer is part of that. But it would be we have a number of the campuses have that innovation and entrepreneurship hubs that specifically would focus on helping with them. And I work with those folks. We're part of our OSPO at UCSC is part of that group. So that's how I would also take it. Very similar approach.
Yep.
All right. Well, it's a little past the top of the hour. Thank you both. And if I could be so bold as to invite anyone who might have additional questions to contact you both. I know both Angela and Stephanie are members, as they mentioned, of a lot of different groups, and I can tell you from first-hand experience, I've reached out to both Angela and Stephanie, but also Curious and Chaos and other groups that are working on OSPOs on campuses, and they've got a lot of great resources, so I'm sure they'd be willing to help you in your efforts. So once again, thank you both for joining us today. And before I get fired, thanks both to the board directors that are here for participating. I failed to mention that, my bad. But thank you again for being here and helping to raise awareness and adoption of open source in higher education at so many levels.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.